Sundaramukam Tamraravindekshanam Bhaktabhishtavarabhayapradakaram Kaupinamatrojvalam Swatmanandarasanubhutivivasham Sarvanavadyangakam Rimantam Shri Ramaneshwaram Guruvaram Yogasanadhyasitam Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahmamatram Yahamahamiti Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati Pradhivishamanasa Swam Chimbata Majjatava Pavana Chalanarodha Atmanishto Bhavatvam Namo Ramana. In this Tuesday Atma Vichara session from Ramanacentre Center for Learning, we have been reading the reminiscences of Mahakrishna Swami of his stay in Ramanashram before he moved to Brazil. This has been brought out, this reminiscences has been brought out in this book titled Years in the Presence of Ramana, My Master, and edited by our founder President Sri A.R. Natarajan Ji. We have been reading Mahakrishna Swami's accounts on animals last week of the Ramanashram. This week he is talking about the techniques of Bhagavan's teaching. After reading his reminiscences, we will meditate on these by the abundant grace of Bhagavan, and then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Today, since Sharda Akka is not available in town, I'll be continuing to read the reminiscences after the meditation. Then finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. Techniques of teaching. How Bhagavan, or what technique did Bhagavan use for his teaching? Bhagavan Sri Ramana remained silent most of the time. He spoke little and only about what he was asked. All identified with him, independent of their beliefs or races, for Ramana taught the Supreme Self. There existed no restrictions, and Christians as well as yogis, Muslims and Jews all recognized in him the Divine Self and surrendered to him. So the first technique is the technique of Mauna, the highest, because that is how the natural self is. Unless it is asked, it would not suo moto do any actions. So Bhagavan would be like that, silent. He would remain silent, and through that silence, he is expressing the true nature of the self. And therefore, that is the highest teaching. So it is said that that is the highest way to teach. And that is the teaching, that is the way Sri Dakshinamurti also adopted. Bhagavan says there was 1 year of questioning by all the devotees of Dakshinamurti, and Dakshinamurti went on clarifying all their doubts. But that became more food for their further doubts, for their more further contemplation. Having understood that this approach is not going to reveal the truth which is so natural, Sri Dakshinamurti went to silence, and in his silence, all the doubts of the students got clear. So Bhagavan would take, not because he has to follow a Dakshinamurti process or anything, because he remained as the self. And the natural way of the self is to be in the silence. And that is the most direct way also to teach about what self is. So here we see the technique of silence was the one which was used most of the time. Continuing, he says, we heard the elder disciples tell how the master guided people since the first years in Virupaksha. He was not a reformer. He did not discourage people to follow their religions and customs in their particular lives. No master interferes in the path that people tread, no matter how strange this path appears to be. No religious custom or traditions were followed in the ashram. The ashram is not a reflection of the world. It is in it one seeks the consciousness of the absolute self. One seeks something that is not found in the profane world. In the world, people involve themselves with values that are not natural and become slaves of these values, even though they believe that they dominate them. A very beautiful revelation. In the world, people involve themselves with values that are not natural and become slaves of these values, even though they believe that they dominate them. In the ashram, one follows rules of moral and spiritual conduct dictated by pure intuition. I repeat, in the ashram, one follows rules of moral and spiritual conduct dictated by pure intuition. He who forgot this was firmly reprimanded by Sri Ramana. Here, in the second technique is being talked about. And this was available to everybody, no matter what religion they came. Their religion and their faith in following those religions were not questioned, but they were all led to the highest, the Supreme Self. And in the ashram, as such, there was no such belief that we will follow Hindu religion or any of the sub-religions or nothing like that. The only aim was to know about the Supreme Self, the Absolute Self. So here, Mahakrishna Swami goes on to say that how we, and there is also one revelation about allowing the natural religion to which people are born to be followed, because that's how Ishvara has created. There is no need for us to change that. Unless we accept that supreme intelligence has already done the right job, how can we superimpose our own intellect? So it is the best way to accept that has been already ordained and take it further to the supreme goal of finding who we really are. So Bhagavan would more focus on that, he says. And he talks about how we live in this world. As last time in the Tuesday Satsang, Nandakumarji was beautifully explaining it. Our day-to-day thing is, we are not happy with the way we are living today. So we read some books, we read some, whether it is materialistic or spiritual, we read something, and that talks about some higher value, which we think is very beautiful to have. And therefore we strive to achieve that. And we see that when we strive and achieve it, our life is now of a higher value than what we were 3 months back or 6 months back. But it doesn't stop, because the mind is still given reality, because the mind is still looking for some higher value outside. It would read another book or another people, or somehow it will find some higher value than where it is today. So it will continue to strive, and it has tasted success that by doing certain things, it can uplift itself for a higher value from what it is today. So here Mahakrishna Swami identifies that this is not the natural way. The natural way is the self alone is. The unnatural way is to take the body, the mind, and the values are all there. It's not that it is very bad. It's definitely an aid with which we have all improved, as Nanda Kumarji said. But that is not the goal of spirituality. The goal of the spirituality is to know who we are, because in knowing who we are, the natural truth that we are, the transcendental truth of all of that we have experienced, will be known here and now, and that is the highest virtue one can get. So Bhagavan would definitely try to give the highest to all of us, nothing less of the highest. And that is what we see in the first paragraph. He would give it in the form of silence, because that is the true nature of the self. But here, when people come from the world, going through this process of continuous improvement, self-improvement, not understanding that it is not very natural, but it is something that they themselves have believed it to be the right way of living. And further he says, they also believe that they can dominate them. This is the most important thing. We may be living with certain values, thinking that we may be able to dominate and live that way, irrespective of outside circumstances. But there will always be pariksha, there will always be tests, when the values that we are holding on to will be put to the highest test. And then many times we may find to stay in the dominant position, that I will hold on to the values, may become very, very difficult. However, what Bhagavan teaches is, when we abide in the self that we are, all things happen according to the automatic divine action. So all values, all dharma will be automatically happen. That divine force will make the mind, body, intellect work in unison for its cause. And therefore, to inquire who am I and get back to the self, to get back to our true nature, is the most important thing. And Mahakrishna Swami says how this value-based thing that we do is a prison, is a limitation that we are creating for ourselves, and it is not natural. In the ashram, one follows the rule of moral and spiritual conduct dictated by pure intuition. Pure intuition is surrender. Surrender the body, surrender the mind, surrender the intellect. because there is nothing that I know that I can speak of or claim that I can, and also further claim that I can practice it irrespective of outside circumstances. Since I cannot know and I cannot do, and since I have a very limited intellect, the best course is to surrender. Then the intuition will drive the body, the mind, the intellect. And Bhagavan would always recommend that conduct would be recommended. So he goes on to say, whoever forgot this, that means whoever went back to using their mind, intellect, would be reprimanded by Sri Bhagavan, asking us to surrender. And we can see that in self-enquiry, when we practice self-enquiry for quite some time, if we go away from this enquiry of surrender, which makes us surrender to the highest truth, we get reprimanded. We get quite some beatings from Bhagavan. We feel shy, and we will again come back to self-enquiry, surrender whatever things that we had done with a sense of knowership or doership to that very self, and then only feel relieved. So that's what Sri Mahakrishna Swami is talking about. That if we were to diverge away from that state of surrender, invariably we would get reprimanded by Sri Bhagavan. We'll understand how beautifully in these two paragraphs is that Bhagavan's teaching and Bhagavan's technique of teaching is to be very, very natural. Very natural. If you are in a religion, be fine with it. If you are having a body, mind, intellect, no problem. Thoughts come, be fine with it. All you need to do is offer it back to that true self that you are by inquiring, to whom is this, who am I? You need not fight with the thought. You need not try to suppress it. Need not try to make some use of it by doing something. Just offer it back to the self. Then the self, by its intuition, will guide you, and it will ensure that the path of the dharma in the outside and the abidance of the surrender to the truth inside is taken care. In these two paragraphs is bringing us home to how Bhagavan's teaching aims at every moment to keep us free from all the juggleries of the world, to be in peace with what Ishvara has created within or outside. Within, though, we have peace only. Outside also, if we don't fight with it, if we accept it as ordained by Ishvara, and then all things will happen, because that is only one self, within and without. If we were to say that there is a within and without, because we are talking about it. So Bhagavan is saying here, in these two paragraphs, that the natural silence of the self, oneness of the self with everything, even with the manifested plane, and also of the within, is the right approach to go with. And for that, he has given us Atma Vichara. Says no matter what thoughts come, no matter what circumstances we are, it is for whom when we inquire. Always the revelation will be that it is for me. And in so, what are we referring to as me is the next question. Who am I? Is the question to ask ourselves. What are we referring oneself as I? If we have taken the body and the mind and this name as to be ourselves, the who am I is a wake-up call to question what it is, who we really are, and get back to the truth, the self that we are. And if we are right, and the who am I, if we don't have any thoughts, no reaction, then obviously the light of the self is guiding everything. through intuition. There is nothing that one needs to do. So until we become bereft of all vasanas, which reacts to things that are happening, until we reach that state where vasanas no more control us, that is the vasana kshaya, all the destruction of the vasanas happen, we should continue to inquire every changes by questioning to whom is this, who am I? With Bhagavan's immense grace, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Bhagavate Shri Ramana. We continue to read the reminiscences. If some questions, even a sly one, that means a cunning one, served as a means for a teaching, Bhagavan was compassionate enough to answer it. He used the method of answering a question with another question. These dialogues were sometimes extensive until the questioner reached the conclusion that only the self exists, and the body and all the manifested world are illusory. The problems proposed in the beginning of the dialogue ended up being diluted invariably in the truth of being become futile before the supreme truth. It was astonishing to see the precision and the objectivity with which Ramana proposed his questions and crushed the apparently irrefutable logic which people directed to him. This is the third techniques of teaching. When people would come very capable of their intellect with a very cunning objective, Bhagavan would recognize that the intellect would be the nest. It would be, instead of having a tiff with that, it would be much nicer to direct its ability to logically think, to get back to that truth which alone is. So when they would come with such questions, Bhagavan would answer with again a question, not simply some question about a question which would direct the questioner to his true nature, to that supreme self. And Mahakrishna Swami says that was very astonishing how he would come up with it. Obviously, Bhagavan was not relying on his intellect. Bhagavan was only had the self alone as his object, as his experience. And the intuition would direct the seeker who could have come to him with any motive to the one truth, and therefore recognize that there is a higher truth beyond the intellect, which is the pure intelligence itself. So in this 3 paragraphs, we see the 3 different techniques. One is the silent teaching of the self. The second one is completely based on intuition, no matter who they are, not to use their mind or intellect. But if somebody were to use an intellect, Bhagavan would put a question to him. He would take the intellect back to the self only by the act of questioning it, by properly guiding the intellect to that one self, one's own true nature. Then we go to the 4th way, the technique of teaching, which Sri A.R. Natarajanji highlights it. And there is quite an important reason. The gaze, or merely the presence of Sri Ramana, was a strong source of teaching. And I remember Akka saying, Sri A.R. Natarajanji would insist that when we go to Ramanashramam or when we sit in front of a Bhagavan's picture, he would, and we close our eyes to meditate, he would say, why are you closing your eyes? Look at him. Look at the gaze in which he is looking back at you. That is the most beautiful thing that you can ever see, experience. So he would always insist. Akka would say that even after the food at Ramanashramam or dinner after Ramanashramam, he would go round and round around the Bhagavan Samadhi and gaze at it. He would not be sitting in one corner and meditating. And he would insist that that graceful vision of Bhagavan, which is the real presence of Bhagavan, itself is a strong source of teaching. Because when we look at the eyes of Bhagavan, we go to the state of the self, because that eyes is not revealing anything objective. If we keep looking at Bhagavan's eyes, Bhagavan's face, we don't get anything objective, anything that we can hold on to. Like if I see a mobile, I may find something objective, a button to be pressed, colors to be seen. But when you look at Bhagavan's picture, the gaze, the full grace of Bhagavan, which is only revealing the truth, only abiding in the truth and revealing the truth, is not revealing anything objective, because there is nothing objective in the self. So naturally, that gaze will take us to the same state, and it is very indefinable, can only be experienced. So the gaze of Bhagavan is another way of teaching the truth, says Mahakrishna Swami here. And Sri A.R. Natarajanji highlights it. Further he writes, many people went to him and their doubts were clarified even if they had not asked questions. The knowledge transmitted by this method never abandons the person that has acquired it, for it was impregnant in his essence and not simply in his intellect. This part Sri A.R. Natarajanji highlights again. The knowledge transmitted by this method never abandons the person that has acquired it, for it was impregnant in his essence and not simply in his intellect. As we discussed, Bhagavan's self-abidance would only get transmitted even in his vision. And it includes him in its true nature, includes the self in its true nature. And it would be impregnant. It is having the real experience of that, impregnant of the essence, he says. The essence is sometimes cannot be given by words. In words, we can only point to, we can direct to, in the form of intellect or question answers. Whereas this vision, which is full of the self, which is full of the essence, was getting transmitted, says Mahakrishna Swami here. The silent attitude, which is in truth the most eloquent of teachings, became the marked characteristics of Bhagavan Sri Ramana. The silence of the self, which was transmitted through the vision, through his eyes, which is in truth the most eloquent of teaching. That is the most direct way, highest way of transmitting, became the way of Bhagavan's teaching, says Mahakrishna Swami. Further he continues, it was not rare for some people to try to test the master by making improper questions. Since the masters are not concerned about resolving controversies, Sri Ramana maintained silence, showing with his how inopportune are questions that have no relations with the process of self-consciousness of the enquirer. A master makes himself present to help people to become conscious of the divine and not to feed the mind with few facts that will generate new questions in an interminable chain. This is the most important part which here Natarajanji highlights again. A master makes himself present to help people to become conscious of the divine and not to feed the mind with new facts that will generate new questions in an interminable chain. And Bhagavan, we know, is an adept in it. Even in the self-enquiry, to whom is this, who am I? We slowly and steadily recognize by answering the question, who am I, or any of this, we are only feeding the mind, and that will come up with more doubts and more questions. Somewhere in the process, the practitioner of the enquiry will recognize that who am I is not a question to be answered. Who am I is a way of waking us to question to what are you identifying right now with? Are you identifying with a thought? Are you identifying with a body? Are you identifying yourself as a seer of an object? To whom is this? Who am I? And by questioning that question, Bhagavan is waking us to our real nature of being the self. This is what, therefore, we see that Bhagavan, even though the questioner may have improper question, may not understand what is his present level of self-consciousness. That means here a small s is being used. That means the questioner was identifying himself more with the body, mind, and the ego. And with that, he would question it to Bhagavan. And that may have a lot of controversies. Bhagavan was so graceful that he would present the people to become conscious of their divinity. So he would turn the attention back to their divinity and not to feed the mind. And the only way to make us recognize our divinity is not to give the mind to hold on to some new idea, some new concept, but rather generate that new question so that it would generate a new question and become a chain. So he would turn the attention back to, by the way of questioning, back to the self, says here Bhagavan, Mahakrishna Swami. But Sri Ramana did not show discordance or impatience. He only used the supreme virtue of neutrality. That is the nature of the self. Good, bad, right, wrong, all of it, no matter in how many different ways in the waking stage or in the dream, the mind comes up with for seeking attention towards it. The light of the self is equipoised. The more and more we understand the nature of oneself, we see that it is equipoised. It is giving the light equally for the good as well as for the bad. And it is not disturbed by the good nor disturbed by the bad. We understand that neutrality of the self, and that is what it is. That is where we need to, that sahaja, that natural neutrality, that natural silence, that natural divinity, that natural intuition of dealing with everything is what that sahaja has to come out. And Bhagavan would demonstrate it, that we need not have to get used to our mind and intellect and body and our all knowledge base to live in this world, even spiritually. If we can only see the natural truth of oneself, we understand that the intuition, the equanimity of the self, the silence of the self, with irrespective of outside circumstances, the self not being dependent on anything, when we recognize all this natural thing of ourselves, the sahaja that is been there, not only for the one who is doing the sadhana, it is there for everything. Everything is in the same state. So we recognize that my own not recognizing of it made me feel I am an individual, I have to do this, or made me see somebody as a great Mahatma who has already done and reached it. But when more and more we inquire and we go back to the sadhana, the more and more we recognize the true nature of ourself, we see that the self alone is, there is nothing that one needs to do. All we need to do is let go the wrong notions, the ignorant ideas of division that there is something apart from the self. And the more and more we practice this self-enquiry, the more and more it becomes clearer that the sahaja is the most naturally given thing for all of us. And letting go that highest truth which is so naturally available, we are holding on to some meager things imagined in the mind, meager things that are sensed by the senses, a meager idea that I am an individual, meager belief in money, power, intellect, and meager belief in this creation which is all transitory. The more and more we understand the nature of the self, we find out that none of these creation, none of these things are really a hindrance to the self. It is all driven by the self. It is the leela of the self, but the self alone is, and it is so naturally available from a plant to an animal to an insect and everything. So the divinity alone is shining in its full force in everything. And the ignorant idea that there is divisions and individuals and something like intellect, mind, power is going to take us somewhere, is all have to be let go on by inquiring, says Bhagavan. In these beautiful reminiscences, Sri Mahakrishna Swami is letting us know how Bhagavan would use various techniques to reveal the natural divinity, the natural self that we are here and now. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us continue to read the reminiscences next week. We'll conclude this satsang with prayers to Bhagavan. Apara Satchit Sukavarirashe Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Pramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami. Thank you. Namo Ramana.